Okay, welcome to Daf Yomi Brachot, 1 week at a time. This is our 8th lesson, which is super exciting. We are going to be reviewing Daf Mem Zayin 47 through 53. So let's start with Daf Mem Zayin, Daf 47. We're continuing with learning the laws of Birkat HaMazon. And the daf starts with who do we honor and who do we wait for in the middle of our meal for Birkat HaMazon. And the Gemara says that we don't honor people when we're on the road. Meaning, again, we learned before on previous dafim that when we're on the road, we're focusing on the road and sometimes it's dangerous. So we're not going to worry about honor and different people's honor on the road. But when we are sitting around a table at somebody's house, you are going to wait for the host to eat his bread first, and then you can begin to partake in the meal. The host, who's called the botzea, the one who makes hamotzi, he must wait for everybody till everybody says amen to his bracha of hamotzi, and then he can eat. The Gemara continues and talks about different ways to say amen. It shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't be too short. If you prolong it a certain amount, then you get long life. It talks about the most honored person at the table should be the one who says the zimun, the one who is going to lead the Birkat HaMazon. And anybody who joins into the zimun, if he did eat from doubtful tithed produce, in Hebrew, dmai, if we're not sure if it was tithed or not, or if he ate from Maaser Rishon or anyone who keeps the mitzvot, all these people are included in the zimun. The Gemara has a lengthy discussion on what is an am ha'aretz. Am ha'aretz, I think loosely translated, is an ignoramus, someone who does not know different laws or maybe doesn't keep different laws. You can look at Daf Mem Zayin 47 for that list over there. It finishes up talking about who doesn't join in the zimun, in the benching, in the Birkat HaMazon together. The Mishnah talks about people who ate from improperly redeemed food, a non-Jew, children, women, and slaves. We learn actually make their own zimun. So for the women out there, you should know that is an issue. That is something that we do, that we can have a zimun, 3 women together. And that's the end of Mem Zayin. Mem Chet 48 continues on who can complete a zimun. Let's say you have 9 people to make it 10 or 2 people to make it 3. And the question is, can a child complete the zimun, be that last person? The Gemara says that if he knows who we're blessing, then he can be part of the zimun. The Gemara continues and says if 9 people have eaten bread and 1 person ate vegetables, that 1 person can be part of the zimun, to make the 10th person, which is, I think, very interesting. A lot of people think that you have to have eaten, this is very practical, some people think you have to have eaten either cake or something you would make a mizonot on, something that had grain in it, or bread. The Gemara actually says that if 9 people, or 8, or even 7 have eaten bread, but the other 3, 2, or 1 has only eaten vegetables, that's okay to make a group of 10 in order to say Elokeinu in the zimun. The Gemara continues and says, who can exempt other people in the zimun, in Birkat HaMazon, in the grace after meals? You needed to have eaten something or had something to drink. There's actually an interesting story of Yanai, who is the king, and his wife, the queen, Shlom Tzion HaMalka, who brings her brother Shimon ben Shetach to lead the Birkat HaMazon. And he actually says, well, how am I going to lead the Birkat HaMazon? I haven't eaten anything. And then, please, when you join, mute your mute your computers. Thank you. So again, we learned from Shimon ben Shetach, you have to at least drink some wine in order to lead the Birkat HaMazon. The Gemara continues and talks about the source for Birkat HaMazon, that there are 4 brachot, 4 blessings in Birkat HaMazon, and different psukim that suggest the source for this bracha. It also continues and actually reminds us of a conversation we actually had together a number of weeks ago on the source for Birkat HaMazon and for the brachot on learning Torah, Birkot HaTorah. It goes back and repeats that conversation. Can we learn one from the other? Just to remind us, remember we said that on food from the Torah, we say the bracha after we eat, and for learning Torah, we make the bracha before we learn. And you can see, I think it might have been our 3rd or 4th lesson where we discussed the significance of that. So you can go back if you want, but the Gemara repeats that conversation. And that is the end of Mem Chet 48. Can you hear me now? Excellent. Okay. If there's a problem, let me know again. But we left off with important themes of Birkat HaMazon. And wait, sorry. I hope you can hear me. Important themes of Birkat HaMazon are talking about the Brit Milah, the covenant, the Brit Milah, and the Torah. We have this idea of Bonei Yerushalayim in Birkat HaMazon. And the Gemara continues and talks about mentioning the idea of Malchut, of God's kingship, in the blessing of Hatov v'Hamitiv. And it continues and talks about what if you forgot to include, as we know, just to wish everybody a Chodesh Tov. It is Rosh Chodesh Adar. So if you were to eat bread today, you need to make sure to add the special blessing for the new month, Ya'aleh v'Yavo. If you forget it, says the Gemara, if you forget it in Shmona Esrei, you need to repeat your Shmona Esrei. But if you forgot it in your Birkat HaMazon, the Gemara says that you do not have to repeat your Birkat HaMazon. The Gemara continues on Daf Mem Tet and talks about how much you need to eat in order to say Birkat HaMazon, and the options are either a kezait, which is a very familiar measurement, the amount of an olive, or the amount of a kabetza, the amount of an egg. The significance is, of course, when we talk about the pasuk that says, ve'achalta, you ate, v'savata, you were full, uberachta, and then you bless God. The Gemara says, the achalta, you usually eat a kazait, an olive. But it also mentions this idea of being satiated, so that would be a kabetza, and that's the machloket, that's the That is the argument that we have in the Gemara, and that daf finishes on different texts that we say at the beginning of Birkat HaMazon, depending on how many people are joining, whether it's 10 or 100 or 1,000, even up to 10,000, which is just, I thought, so interesting. Daf Nun 50 talks about making sure you don't exclude yourself from a group. I think it's really important in terms of like the individual and the community, especially here when we're talking about joining together to say Birkat HaMazon. The Gemara talks about making sure that you join together to say Birkat HaMazon and you join in as a group. The Gemara continues and talks about more brachot according to the number of people, and talks about when people are benching together, again, this idea of being in a group, then it talks about if you're 3, you have to bench together. If you're, let's say, 6, you can break up into 2 groups of 3, but any less, you shouldn't break up and be together as a group. Again, if you're 10, you should bench together. Again, when I say bench, I mean say Birkat HaMazon, the grace after the meals. And then, again, if you're 20, then you could break off into 10 and 10, and so on. The Gemara continues and says that if 2 groups are eating and they can see each other, then they can join together to say Birkat HaMazon. And it even says that if there's a waiter that's going between the 2, then that can join the 2 groups, and they can also, even if they can't see each other, they can say Birkat HaMazon together. The Gemara continues and talks about 4 different laws pertaining to bread, all of which are about being careful not to ruin it, to be very sensitive to the bread. It seems that there is a distinction between bread and other foods. Again, as we know, bread has its own blessing, and therefore it seems to be a more important food, and therefore we have it has its own blessing. The Gemara there ends on Daf Nun on 50, talking about, as we mentioned, we're supposed to make a blessing before we eat. But let's say we put something in our mouth and we forget that we didn't make the blessing. The Gemara says that if it's liquid, so if you spit it out, you're just going to waste it. So therefore, you should swallow it. If it's something you can spit out, let's say you ate a piece of apple, so you could, in theory, spit it into your hand, make the bracha, and then eat it again. Again, we don't want you to be wasting food, but we do want you to make the bracha, the blessing. And if it's something that you can't really spit out because, you know, it's going to be something that's disgusting, you can move it to the side of your mouth, make the bracha, and then continue chewing and swallowing. So I thought that was just very interesting in terms of practical halacha. Nun Aleph 51, it talks about someone who didn't make this blessing before he ate, and now he remembers. Should he stop right now and make the bracha or not? And then there's a whole conversation about a drink that they used to drink in the Talmudic time called asparagus. It sounds like asparagus, but it was not. It was cabbage that was soaked in wine, and the Gemara talks about how it has it's very nutritious. It has very healthy benefits for your body. The Gemara continues and talks about angels who give good advice to different rabbis. Some of those advice pertain to the kos shel bracha, the cup that you are going to make Birkat HaMazon on, the cup that you are going to bless when you say Birkat HaMazon. And you can look over there for the 10 things. We're not really going to discuss all 10 things. Then there's a great story about a woman named Yalta. She was Rav Nachman's wife, and Ula and Rav Nachman are sitting around the table, and the Gemara before the story says that a husband, after he blesses the wine when he in Birkat HaMazon, he should pass it to his wife. And the Gemara says that Ula was actually saying the blessing, and then Rav Nachman says, pass it to Yalta, my wife, and he says, no, you're supposed to pass it, I'm not passing it. There's a whole big fight. Yalta gets very upset. Unfortunately, she breaks 400 barrels of wine, and the Gemara continues with that story. So I thought it's just a very interesting story. I'm not going to get into too many details because I do want to learn together with you something else on another Amud. Nun Aleph 51 continues and talks about proper conduct during Birkat Hamazon. You shouldn't talk until until they drink from the kos shel bracha. Again, the kos, the cup of wine that is used when saying Birkat Hamazon. And that is the end of the seventh perek, of the seventh chapter. So kol hakavod to all of you who have completed 7 chapters of Masechet Brachot. The beginning of the 8th chapter on the end of Nun Aleph, we're actually going to learn together, but it's going to be a lot of disagreements between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And as I mentioned last week, there is, again, Rabbi Natan Farber is doing these beautiful, he is called Style Adaf, these beautiful like images, graphics of each daf. So I wanted to show you here, we're not going to go through each one, but these are all differences of opinions between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel that pertain to the meal. And you can see here there's the order of Kiddush and wine. We're going to discuss that. There's the order of washing and pouring, of placing the napkin, of cleaning the house. The text on the fire, maybe we'll do a little bit of that. The order of Havdalah, and if one forgot to bench, and the order of wine and Birkat Hamazon. So I just wanted you to be able to see that. It's really just a beautiful, I think, graphic, and really is able for us to like visualize these discussions. So as I mentioned, we do have a number of different disagreements between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And we'll talk about 1 or 2 of them. The Gemara on Nun Gimel continues and talks about what light, as you see where we are right now, there is a discussion about Havdalah. Again, Havdalah is the ceremony and group of blessings that we say after Shabbat on Saturday night when the sun has gone down and the 3 stars come out, when it's really night. We say Havdalah, and Havdalah, we'll talk about the details in a minute, but one of the blessings that we say is over a fire, over a candle, and the Gemara talks about on Nun Gimel, on actually today's daf, on 53, what kind of fire can you make the bracha on? And it talks about if the fire was lit before Shabbat and it lasted the entire Shabbat, then you can use it. If a Jew lit it, but not if it was lit by a non-Jew or Jew on Shabbat in a prohibitive way. Also talks about what if you're walking outside and you see a light from the city, right? Again, the light from the houses is coming from fire. So can I make the bracha on that light? And they say that if the Gemara says if it's a mostly Jewish city, then you can use that light to make the bracha on the fire. What about a fire from a furnace? The Gemara, or an oven, the Gemara says that when we're talking about the end of the fire, meaning when it, not right when you light it because it's very weak, but once it starts to burn, then you can use that fire. What about the light from a synagogue or a study hall, a Beit Midrash? Again, if it was used for illumination, to make the, as light in the room, then you can use it. The Gemara continues and talks about the blessing on the bisamim, on the spices. That's also, as you can see here, part of the Havdalah service. What do we make? What spices are we allowed to use? And the Gemara says that if the spices are there for pleasure, then you can make the bracha on it, the blessing on it. But if it's there just to prevent, let's say, a bad smell, maybe there was a bad smell in the room and you put in some room deodorizer, that would not be something you would make the bracha for Havdalah on. Again, it's not honoring the Havdalah ceremony. The Gemara continues and talks about, must one be able to benefit from the light in order to make that bracha? And the Gemara says, the Mishnah says yes. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're far away, you can still bless it as long as you can see the flame, or even if it's like glimmering coals, but not if it's dying coals. So it really depends on what is there in front of you. What about, the Gemara ended today talking about what happens if you made here, that's this one. What if you made, you started to eat and you said Birkat Hamazon, you didn't say Birkat Hamazon, you went on your way. Do you have to return to the place that you said that you ate in order to say Birkat Hamazon or not? I thought this was very interesting. Beit Shammai, we'll talk about what their ideologies are in a second, but Beit Shammai says you actually have to return, lachzor lemakom, you have to go back to where you ate and then say Birkat Hamazon. Beit Hillel say, listen, it's really hard, you can just stop where you are, say Birkat Hamazon where you are. And Beit Shammai says to Beit Hillel, why would you say that? If you left your wallet, a few blocks away, would you go back for your wallet? I mean, it doesn't say wallet, but it says gold or a pocket of money. Would you go back there? And Beit Shammai is saying, yeah, most people would go back. And then there's a really two cute stories of someone who is in a caravan and he forgets to say Birkat Hamazon. And he basically tells the caravan driver, I left a golden bird, a golden dove where we were. Can you hold on 1 minute? I need to run back and get it. Right? If he would have said, I forgot to say Birkat Hamazon, that would never have worked. But the fact that he left gold, okay, and then they stop and they wait, he actually goes there and he's rewarded for going all the way back. The Gemara says that when he gets there, there's actually a golden dove waiting for him. So that was his reward for going back. The Gemara continues and says that we actually have 72 minutes in order to say Birkat Hamazon. So those of you sitting at the Shabbos table, you finish eating and then you keep talking with your friends and you talk and you talk and you talk and you talk. You actually have 72 minutes from when you stopped eating, meaning as long as you're eating something, you can keep going for hours. But just practical halacha, if you don't eat anything and you're just talking, then you have 72 minutes in order to say Birkat Hamazon. The last idea on today's daf was this idea of answering amen. When someone makes a blessing, a bracha, those who hear the bracha need to say amen. It's part of that, I would say, collective blessing. And the Gemara says that if you see a Jew making a blessing, even if you didn't hear the beginning, you can say the blessing, you can say amen to his blessing, even if you didn't hear the beginning or what blessing it was. Because you can rely on the fact that the Jew is making a good bracha. But if it's someone who, the Gemara says, talks about a kuti is somebody who in the time of the already in the time of the Tanakh was a group of people who decided to convert. Some say that they were pressured to convert, or they only took upon themselves certain mitzvot, and therefore there's actually a discussion in the Gemara whether or not the Kutim are considered Jewish or not, depending on the time that the either Mishnah, Braita, or Gemara is talking about. Sometimes we accept them as Jews and say yes. Other times we say no, they're more like non-Jews because they don't really keep all the mitzvot. So here is actually one of those instances where the Gemara says that if you didn't hear what the kuti said, you heard it was some sort of bracha, some sort of blessing, but you didn't hear what he said, you cannot answer amen because you don't know what he said. And then the daf today ends with this discussion on what's better, to actually make the bracha or to say the bracha or to answer amen. And that's how we ended today. So what I would like to do right now, as you see in this graphic, we have a lot of conflict between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So let's just take a step back and give some context. Hillel and Shammai were great sages, had different, I would say, halachic philosophies. Shammai was, and again, we use the word Beit Shammai to connote the study hall, the Beit Midrash of Shammai, meaning Shammai students now comprise Beit Shammai, and they become a school of thought. Beit Hillel is, again, the school of thought of Hillel. The idea being, or in general, most of the arguments that they have, Shammai or Beit Shammai, the school of thought, is generally more stringent, generally sticking to the letter of the law. Beit Hillel, I would say, is a little bit more lenient, a little bit more, I want to say a little bit more in touch with what people are doing around him. In general, the halacha follows Hillel or Beit Hillel. So in all of these, actually the end of the Mishnah is going to say, in all of these things we follow Hillel. And we'll talk about something very interesting about them in a little bit. So let's start our learning. We're going to start on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Bet 51b, and it's the beginning of the 8th chapter. And we have actually the entire chapter of Mishnayot here. We're not going to read all of them. Again, it's going to be all of the things we just mentioned before. All of these things are mentioned here in the Mishnah. So I want to learn a little bit with you. We're going to talk about the order of Kiddush and the order of Havdalah. Now, for us to understand, we're very used to, or for those of you who are used to, we have very set texts, meaning you can Google what is the Havdalah service, and you will get the text of the Havdalah service. What is Birkat HaMazon, or what is Kiddush? You know, you can Google it or open up your Sidur. You will have the text of the Kiddush. Just realize that when the Mishnah is talking about the order of Kiddush and Havdalah, the order wasn't set yet. So this is really I think very interesting to understand. I think we take a lot of these things for granted. Of course, there's a set text, but here in the Mishnah and even the Gemara, we're trying to understand what is the order for both of these things. So just to give you an idea for Kiddush, and those of you can Google it later who are not familiar, Kiddush is said on Friday night to bring in the Shabbat, and on the night of festivals, so too during the day. The Kiddush blessing, the Bracha of Kiddush, is 2 parts. Really 3 parts for us. We have psukim, we have passages from the Torah that talk about Shabbat. We have the blessing on the wine, because again, Kiddush is said, we're sanctifying the day, and it's said on a cup of wine or grape juice. The Kiddush is said on a cup of wine, therefore we make the blessing on the wine. That's called the Bracha al Hayayin. And following that, or we're not sure, but really following that, we make the bracha on the Shabbat. We are mikadesh the Shabbat. We are sanctifying the Shabbat. It's a beautiful idea that if you look in the Torah, it talks about God sanctifying the Shabbat, and God makes us his partners. So every Friday night, we are able to sanctify the Shabbat with Kiddush. So as we start learning, Elu dvarim sheben Shammai uben Beit Shammai uben Beit Hillel baseuda. Here are conflicts, differences of opinion between the Beit Midrash, the study hall of Shammai, and the study hall of Hillel when it pertains to the Seudah, to the meal. Beit Shammai Omrim Mevarech al Hayom ve'achar kach mevarech al Hayayin. First, you're going to make the bracha on the day, and then you're going to make the bracha on the wine. Beit Hillel Omrim Mevarech al Hayayin ve'achar kach mevarech al Hayom. Right? Beit Hillel says, no, first you're going to make the blessing on the wine, and then you're going to make the blessing on the day. And we're going to see why each one says what they say. Let's continue a little bit. I'm going to skip, again, as I showed you before, there are a number of differences of opinion. I'm going to skip down to here where we're going to get to Havdalah. So let's just understand Havdalah. Havdalah, as I mentioned before, is the ceremony that we're going to make after Shabbat to end Shabbat and start our week. It actually has 4 parts. We talk about we have the wine, we have the bisamim, the spices, we have the candle, and we have Havdalah. Here, Havdalah is what we say, Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. God, we praise God for making these distinctions between things that are sanctified, like Shabbat, that has a special sanctity, and the mundane, the chol. What we're going to see here is actually a very interesting case. What happens if you ate the meal right before Havdalah, which we call Seudah Shlishit or Shalashudis, the third meal of the day? It's like an afternoon meal that you eat before the Shabbat is over. But as I mentioned before, there is a custom to say Birkat HaMazon over a cup of wine. Now, the Gemara, the Mishnah is actually talking about, what if you only have 1 cup of wine and you need that for Birkat HaMazon, but also for Havdalah? And the Mishnah is going to say, you're going to save that wine, and after Shabbat, we're going to put Birkat HaMazon and Havdalah together. So look what it says. Beit Shammai Omrim. What is going to be our order for Havdalah? So Beit Shammai says, Ner, you make the blessing on the candle. V'mazon, here mazon is Birkat HaMazon. Then bisamim, then the spices, then Havdalah. Then you're going to do Havdalah. Beit Hillel says, Omrim, Ner, first you're going to do the candles, then you're going to, or the fire, sorry, then you're going to do the spices, then you're going to do Birkat HaMazon, and then you're going to do Havdalah. So now, just to take a step back for 1 minute, we talked about the ceremony of Havdalah. I just want to give you some background in terms of what are we doing in each thing. So we mentioned that there's fire. Interestingly enough, the question is, why is there fire on Saturday night, meaning right after Shabbat? And let me just see, the Gemara. Sorry, 1 second. Let's wait. So I'm going to explain it outside of the Gemara. So again, we mentioned there's fire, there's spices, and there's yayin, again on the wine, and then there's the Havdalah. So we mentioned wine because that is an important part of making a blessing in general. Fire, the reason we have fire in Havdalah is that the Gemara actually explains that, first of all, fire is the first thing. Remember, in the old days, there are no lights. So fire is the first thing we're going to benefit from after Shabbat, right? Meaning we need to turn on the lights or light a fire so that we have light in our house. Interestingly, I just want to take a step back also to mention, till now, we've been talking about blessings on food, right? What are these blessings? Things that we ingest, right? Things that we get pleasure out of because we've ingested them, right? We bring them into our body. What's interesting is right now we're about to make a blessing on fire and seeing fire, but in general, we should realize that during the week, we don't make any blessings on fire, right? We don't make blessings on things that get pleasure, right? If you have a good shower, you don't make a blessing. There's no bracha for that. So again, why do we make a bracha on the Ner on Saturday night? And the Gemara explains that fire was actually created on Saturday night, on the first Saturday night. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden on Shabbat. Again, they were created right before Shabbat. They spent Shabbat in the Garden of Eden. Yes? Yes? Are they kicked out yet? I take that back. They do not spend Shabbat in the Garden of Eden. They are actually kicked out before Shabbat. I take that back. We could talk about that another time. And they spend Shabbat on earth, and right after Shabbat, the Gemara in Psachim talks about God gave Adam, mankind, this ability to realize or intellect to understand that if I rub two stones together, then it's going to make fire. So we actually commemorate the creation of fire on Saturday night by making a blessing on the fire in Havdalah. Bisamim, spices. Why do we have spices on in the Havdalah ceremony? The Gemara in Masechet Beitzah talks about this idea that on Shabbat we have a what's called a neshama yetira, an extra soul. Again, this idea that on Shabbat it's a very special day. We actually get an extra soul on that Shabbat. But on Saturday night, when Shabbat is over, that neshama leaves us. And in order to comfort us, we actually smell these spices. This idea of smelling the spices comforts us, and as the soul is leaving. So what I'd like to do is let's read in the Gemara a little bit about Kiddush and Havdalah. So the Gemara starts, Tanu Rabbanan, Dvarim sheben Beit Shammai uBeit Hillel b'Seuda. As we mentioned, these are going to be things between, differences between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai omrim mevarech al hayom, ve'achar kach mevarech al hayayin. Right? First you're going to bless the day, and then you're going to bless the wine. Why? And now we're going to get the answer. Why do Beit Shammai say first the day and then the wine? Shehayom gorem liyayin, right? Meaning the day is what makes us have the wine. Meaning it becomes Friday night. It is now Shabbat, and that makes me bring a cup of wine to say Kiddush. Therefore, it seems to Beit Shammai that the Yom, this idea of sanctifying Shabbat, is more important, and therefore you should make that blessing first, and then you should say Borei Pri Agafen, the blessing on the wine. Okay, right? V'kvar Kidesh Hayom, and now Beit Shammai is giving a second answer. Kvar Kiddush Hayom, meaning it already became Shabbat. Va'adayin yain lo ba, meaning Shabbat comes before the wine. The sun goes down, it becomes Shabbat. There's no wine around. Only later do you say Kiddush, and therefore that should show that the day is more important. And says Beit Shammai, you should make the blessing on the day before you make the blessing on the wine. Ubeit Hillel omrim, what do Beit Hillel say? Mevarech al hayayin ve'achar kach mevarech al hayom. First you make the blessing on the wine, and then you make the blessing on the day. Spoiler, that's what we do. But the question is why? So the Gemara explains, Shehayayin gorem likdusha shete'amer, meaning if you have wine, that's when you say kiddush. You're not going to say kiddush if you don't have wine. Now, for those of you who know, if you don't have wine, you are able to make kiddush over your challah, which is just a very interesting idea. It's actually, if you look here in Rashi actually says that for us, right? Shahayayin gorem likdusha shete'amer. Again, that the wine is what causes us to say kiddush. Look what Rashi says. Again, Rashi is going to be on the left side of the page. She'im ein yayin lo mekadshin. If you don't have wine, you can't make kiddush. V'hamekadesh al hapat. And if you're going to make kiddush on the bread, pat means bread, gam hu bimkom yain. The only reason you're allowed to make kiddush on the challah is because it is a substitute for the wine. V'birkat hapat kodemet. And just so you should know, you make hamotzi before you make kiddush. So that's also another practical idea, that if you don't have wine, you can actually make kiddush on your challah. But to go back to the Gemara, Beit Hillel explains, first I'm going to make the bracha, borei pri hagafen, because that's going to be on the wine, because the wine is what's causing me to say kiddush. Davar acher, Beit Hillel also adds a second reason, birkat hayayin tadira. And now we're about to learn a very famous statement of the Gemara and a halachic concept of tadir. Tadir means frequent or frequency. The Gemara just said, birkat hayayin tadira. Birkat hayayin, making a bracha on wine, is more frequently said than birkat hayom, than kiddush. Right? Because, as we know, every day you can have wine, and you would make a borei pri hagafen every time you have a glass of wine, but only once a week, or twice on Shabbat, but only one day a week can you make the bracha on Shabbat, meaning the kiddush. And therefore, again, back in the Gemara, birkat hayayin tadira, the birkat hayom eina tadira. The blessing on the day is not as frequent or as commonly said as the wine, and therefore here comes our very famous line: tadir v'she'eino tadir, tadir kodem. What does that mean? If I have two things that I can do right now, and one is something that in general is said more frequently, and the other thing is said less frequently, the one that's said more frequently is done first. So again, tadir v'she'eino tadir. If you have two things, one is frequent and one is less frequent, tadir kodem. The one that is more frequent, you're going to say first. And a beautiful example is this kiddush, the kiddush that Beit Hillel said, if I have two blessings I can say at the same time. Of course, I can't say them at the same time. I have borei pri hagafen on the wine, and I have kiddush or kedushat hayom to sanctify the day. Beit Hillel says, I'm going to make the bracha on the wine, and then afterwards, I'm going to make the bracha on the on the Kiddush. What's so interesting is if you look at Rashi, the source to this very famous statement is in Masechet Zvachim, and it talks about the order of the sacrifices, and especially on a day when you have a Musaf. So again, as I mentioned, today is Rosh Chodesh, today and tomorrow, and on Rosh Chodesh in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, they would bring a special sacrifice called the Musaf. Beautifully, nowadays we don't have sacrifices, and therefore, as we learned a few weeks ago, we talked about our prayers paralleling the sacrifices. So today, we added a special prayer called Musaf. Musaf literally means added, and the Musaf was, the sacrifice was actually brought after the Korban Tamid. So in Masechet Zvachim it talks about, if now is the morning and I can bring two sacrifices, the Korban Tamid of the morning, meaning the daily sacrifice of the morning, which by the way is parallel to our Shacharit, to our morning prayer. And at the same time, I also want to bring the sacrifice, the Musaf sacrifice, again for Rosh Chodesh, let's say. And today we had Musaf. Which one do we say first? And the Gemara over there says, learning from the passages that talk about these sacrifices, because we actually do what's more frequent. Again, what's more frequent, the Tamid or the Musaf? The Tamid is brought twice a day, every single day in the temple. I'll parallel that we pray twice a day, 3 times a day, really, right? Shacharit and Mincha and Arvit every day. But Musaf, we only say, let's say once a month for Rosh Chodesh, and of course for other holidays as well. So the Gemara explains, first you bring the Korban Tamid, first we daven Shacharit, and then we bring the Korban Musaf, we say Musaf. So just really very interesting to think about this concept of tadir v'she'eno tadir. Another time we see that is when we read the Torah on, let's say, Shabbat that is also Rosh Chodesh, or it's also a holiday. You will read the weekly portion, then you will read whatever is more common. This comes up especially on Shabbat, that is Rosh Chodesh, and is also Chanukah. So again, you can figure out what the order is based on this discussion. So I thought that this was just a really beautiful idea, and understanding the order of different blessings. I'm just going to end with one more idea, which is the end of this page, and it says afterwards, the halacha is like Beit Hillel, and the Gemara asks, Pshita. Pshita means, isn't that obvious? Don't we all know that the halacha is like Beit Hillel? And the Gemara says, how do we know that the halacha is like Beit Hillel? So it says, Dehanafka bat kol, a bat kol, a divine voice came out and actually told us about who the halacha goes according to. What's so interesting, this idea that in Masechet Eruvin, we'll get there next year or in a couple of months, Masechet Eruvin says, and you can sense this tension between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. They were actually fighting for 3 years. Who's right on all of these topics? And they fought and they fought and they fought till a divine voice, a bat kol, came out and said, listen, it's actually a beautiful idea. What did the bat kol say? Elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim chayim. Basically, you're both right. You're both bringing the divine words of God, right? How beautiful are these opinions? However, right, said the Bat Kol, halacha kebeit Hillel, right? The divine voice came down and said, I understand that you're both right in what you say, but the law follows Hillel, Beit Hillel. What's so interesting, this reminds us of a very famous story, which maybe one day we'll get to, a very famous story called Tanur Shel Achnai. It's a very famous story of a machloket between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer on a clay oven that gets broken down and refixed, and is it still impure? But what's the idea? They're both very strong opinions, and Rabbi Eliezer keeps bringing these proofs from nature, right? He says, if I'm right, let this tree move from where it is to where it's going. Let the water flow backwards. Let the walls of the Beit Midrash fall in. All these miraculous events. And Rabbi Yoshua says, I don't care what is going on here, but we do not listen to a bat kol, meaning God gave us these laws, these ideas for us to debate, and we have to have a healthy debate, and the bat kol, the divine voice, isn't going to get involved. So the Gemara says, first of all, we know that we're supposed to follow Beit Hillel. And what does it say? Ema kodem bat kol. Maybe our Mishnah is telling us that the halacha is like Beit Hillel because it was before that bat kol came out. The bait ema leachar bat kol, or maybe it was after the bat kol. And it's like Rabbi Yoshua. You don't have this because it's at the next page at the top, but it says the Rabbi Yoshua hu de'amar ein mashkichin lebat kol. We actually don't listen to the bat kol. So it's just a very interesting idea of lo b'shamayim hi, right? Is Jewish law meant to be, can a divine voice come down today and tell us what to do? Or do the rabbis nowadays need to figure it out? And I think that it's a longer discussion, but it's very interesting here. We have this idea of Beit Shamayim, Beit Hillel, and the Bat Kol is the one who says, the divine voice is the one who says that we follow Beit Hillel. And what does that mean? Again, Beit Hillel is really the one who's more lenient, and the way we follow in terms of our laws. So I think with that, we're going to end today. First of all, there are a few comments here. Lynn added that she's very interested in 1st century before the temple fell, so when things changed, and why is murky, beautiful, and a little confusing. So maybe I'll try to bring that up as we're learning different things that pertain to either while we have the temple and then after. It's really important to understand that transition. So thank you for bringing up that comment, and thank you all for all your comments. And I'm really looking forward to continuing our learning next week. Have a great week. Shavua Tov, as we would say, that's Tadir, and Chodesh Tov, and happy Rosh Chodesh to everyone. And looking forward to learning next week.